Welcome back and more on the day's events. Let us also welcome back once again syndicated talker Sam Sorbo joins us. All right, Sam, let's go ahead and turn to the CIA torture report here because this is what's getting a tremendous amount of attention here. There are those who will say, quite frankly, torture is wrong. Any sort of torture, it is absolutely wrong. It's the wrong thing. America needs to stand for something morally greater. But there are also those who will say, these were people who wanted to kill Americans. They killed innocent people. So we have to do whatever it takes in order to find them and bring them to justice, even if it means we have to bend the rules a little. That's very difficult for a lot of people to be able to grasp that. They're saying, wait a minute, what do we then as Americans stand for? What do you think?
Well, I was talking about this on the air today, and I discovered that I'm very emotional about this particular subject. I think that what Feinstein has done, I see there's no coincidence in her timing the release of this with the testimony of Jonathan Gruber, who called American voters stupid on Capitol Hill. And so I'm very cynical about this. And I think that if we are expected to fight the good fight, then we have to be allowed to fight it the way that it needs to be fought. And the release of this report, the timing of it, the whole message of it is kind of an equivocation. But look, we're bad too. We call those guys bad, but apparently somehow we're bad too because of this. And I think that it's a very dangerous thing, and I think it's absolutely wrong. And because of the political ramifications, I think it must be the wrong thing.
What about those who say then that we are just as wrong as anybody else because we go after human rights violations around the world and we say you're bad for torturing and you're bad for doing this, yet, and here you have the left coming in and they will say that, well, we torture, so we must be just as bad as they are.
You know, the thing is, Ed, that tolerance is only as good as it gets. You cannot tolerate the intolerant because then the intolerant will win. And it's the same thing in warfare. And we are fighting people who behead people. So excuse me, but cry me a river for somebody who's being forced to walk down a hallway and get hit a couple of times. I'm sorry, I don't have sympathy for that person when I know darn well that that person is going to cut off the head of a child the very next day they get out of prison.
I know you're very emotional about this when it comes down to what ISIS is doing right now because there is, as you pointed out, there are the beheading of children. There's sexual slavery that is involved here. A lot of this goes by the board and really doesn't get covered a lot in the media. But isn't this the sort of rank evil that sometimes it almost justifies if you have to go that extra mile in order to bring these people to justice simply because of what they do to the innocents?
I had this conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer on my show. Must you become evil in order to fight evil? Do you get tainted a little bit with that evil? And there's always that danger. But the fact is that in order to fight evil, you have to commit acts of evil. There is no stopping point. There is no, well, I can just be good over here and then evil won't come over here. We need to defend ourselves in order for good to prevail.
As someone who follows the teachings of Jesus Christ and someone who is very religious, how do you come to grips with all that?
It's not considered murder if it's in self-defense.
And is that what we're missing?
And by the way, I don't support the death penalty.
Is that what we're missing in this argument, though? In that sometimes you do have to go that far in order to do things? Is that what the Republicans need to understand? Is that what the Democrats are missing in all this? And then in order to stay safe, sometimes you've got to go there?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a whole version, there's a whole side of, the report that Dianne Feinstein released was not a Senate report, it was a Democrat report. There's a Republican version of this report that doesn't have the same sort of conclusions that her report draws. Mm-hmm. Her report is founded so that we draw the conclusion that we are just as bad as our enemies. That is it's a false narrative. But it's the same thing, you mentioned ISIS, and they're taking female slaves, and you're allowed to beat your slave if you don't beat her in the face, and you're allowed to rape her as many times as you want. 10
seconds.
And now we have the narrative in the United States that our culture hates women. Really? You want to compare those two things?
I'll tell you what, Sam, you've opened up that door, but we're all out of time this time. We will have you back. We'll talk about it again. Always a pleasure. Best to your family, Sam.
Thank you, you too.